Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rumcast. This is the podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. My name is Will Hookinga, here as always with my co-host John Gulla. And John, today we're diving back into kind of an ongoing series, I guess, that we've taken kind of a hiatus from,
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
long
but
overdue,
it's
is what I would say.
long overdue. We actually get a lot of requests for more of these types of
Hmm.
episodes, which is encouraging because it's just, you and I talking the whole time. We don't have any like interviews to kind of lean back on to carry us. But this is going to be the Rumcast Guide to Madeira Rum, joining our other Guide to episodes that we've done. I know we've done one. We did one earlier at the beginning of this year on UK rum. We've
Hmm.
done Puerto Rican rum. We've done Jamaican rum. There's something else that I'm missing. I think, oh, American
Mexican?
rum, Mexican
Did we do
rum. Wow,
Mexican? Yeah.
there's quite a few of these. So
Yeah.
adding another one to the pile today, and excited to get into it. But before we get into that, I know you did some rum festival attending down in your local area.
Area?
Your
Very
local area
local.
of Miami. I ran out of
Um,
words there. Yeah. Tell us about that.
yeah. So every year here is the Rum Renaissance Festival, which is the festival where you and I actually first met,
That's right.
and a few years ago. And it's literally like very not far from my house. I said literally very not far.
Close, in other
It's
words.
close, and so it's a decent show. It's not the biggest. It's not going to bring all of the big brands or the best brands or anything like that, if I'm honest. But
Hmm.
it's a decent showing. And every year I go, I do end up typically finding one or two producers that attend the show that are worthwhile. I mean, there's more than that. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, new or interesting or
Yeah.
exciting or different. So it has a lot of value for me, just being such a very hyper local, you might say, show to me. And Miami, we're spoiled for choice, right? We have quite a few different rum conferences and events down here every
Yeah.
year, and so it's a nice one to go to. There was a couple of things that stuck out to me this year. One was I got to try some Colors of Rum, the Colors of Rum series,
Coming
and
to the US soon, right?
yeah. Yep. And you can actually even buy them right now. They were saying you could buy them and have them shipped in, but that they will be available more in the US soon. One of those interesting was the Guadalupe 1998 Bellevue.
Ooh. Okay.
And that was really good, quite good,
Yeah.
different, something I hadn't had before. So I enjoyed trying that one. And there was
Yeah, those old
they,
Bellevues can be
mhm,
really good. Yeah.
a couple other ones, an old Long Pond that was quite good as well, and some other things that I think they're doing some nice bottlings here. So it's gonna be nice to have yet another entry, independent bottler that's bringing some old aged rums into the country. A couple other things that I'm hoping, Will, that we get a chance to talk about soon on the show. I don't want to reveal too much, but some
Oh,
interesting things there as well that hopefully we'll get a chance to talk more about. But I will
that's
say,
all. That's all you're gonna tease?
yeah, I don't want to. I can't give too much away from it. All right, I'll say
Where, like,
one thing.
give us like an area or something.
I
You
will
got to give the
say,
people a little bit more than that.
okay. Well, I will say first of all, one is about a Martinique agricole producer we've mentioned on the show a few times, but I think they're
Yes.
growing in presence and have some
Hmm.
longer aged, not long aged, but longer than they've had ever available
Okay.
before aged products coming that I really enjoyed. I thought they were spectacular. And so I'm
Spectacular.
hoping, yes, a Gullah fantastic,
Okay.
actually. And another is something I can't give anything away about yet. I was sworn to secrecy on.
Oh my gosh, there's you're coming on and just giving 30% of the news. You're keeping it all close to the chest. Is it close to the
Let's just
chest or close to the
say
vest?
it close to the vest, I
The
think.
vest.
Yeah,
The vest is
yeah,
on the chest though, so it all works out.
yeah. It's close enough. You're right. Just like very long or whatever it was that I said. Yeah, that one I can't say anything about, but I will say that more is coming on that, and it's atypical for the country of origin, and that's what I'm
Okay.
interested in. So that's what is a cool thing coming soon from another American bottler. Let's just say that.
Another American
Independent,
independent bottler?
independent bottler. Yes, to be clear,
Okay.
another
Because Colors of
American
Rum isn't
independent bottler.
Colors of Rum is a EU bottler, right?
Correct. This is not
Okay.
Colors of Rum I'm talking
Right.
about.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I
So
don't
yeah,
think we mentioned that earlier. Colors of Rum is from I don't know what country they operate out of. Do you recall, John?
I thought it was the UK. I could be actually very wrong about that. It could be like Denmark, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know. One of those
I
is
don't
coming
want
to
to
mind.
I don't want to say EU if it's the UK because, they're kind of their
Oh,
own thing
right.
now.
Good
So,
point.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
From Europe somewhere. Anyway, it's not American. The one
In
you're
that
hinting at
area.
is something from an American bottler, it sounds like.
Speaking of areas, I will share this that I am super embarrassed. I have to share this embarrassing story with you and the entire world.
I
Apparently,
always love these. Yeah. Please
um,
continue.
I'm at this show, and I'm talking to a bunch of people that I know, and some I don't. And I go
Holding
home.
court.
Yeah. So I'm there for a couple hours, right?
Yeah.
Holding court is a good way to say it. I'm there for a couple hours, schmoozing, hanging with the people, doing my thing, drinking some rum. And I go to leave. I get in the car and I
It's
realize
the wrong
that
car.
no, 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 no. No, it's worse. My fly was down the entire
Oh my
show,
God.
Will.
What?
I was letting everybody see my business. Not really. Like, I mean, I
Oh,
doubt,
yeah. I
you
was
can
gonna
see
wait. Hold
anything,
on.
but
Yeah. You can't. How do you know it was the entire show?
because, well, I mean, like when I went in, I didn't use like the restroom or anything. Like I got
Okay.
out, I went, like it had to
Okay.
have been. I used the restroom prior to going into the show, and must have forgotten to zip up my zipper. And walking around this entire show with my zipper down, was
I
really something that I was frustrated and upset by afterwards. My credibility at this point, everybody must be like, oh my god, John didn't even know his fly was down the entire time.
What kind of pants were they?
Like khaki shorts.
Okay. I'm really just trying to paint the mental image here for myself, and for listeners too.
Your typical Hawaiian shirt, khaki shorts with an open zipper. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what compelled you to confess this on the podcast, but I commend you for it, and I'm actually interested. If anyone noticed but didn't say anything, first of all, shame on you because if you notice, you should kind of take someone to the
Yeah.
side and do them a favor. Tell them the fly is down. It's you'll save them some embarrassment, and they'll be thankful. I think in most cases. But if you did see it, email us host@rumcast.com because I want to know what you
Hopefully
were
there's not any
thinking.
pictures
How
out there.
noticeable was it? Is there any footage? Yeah, we've got to get to the bottom of this. Wow.
I promise you the next show I go to, my fly will be fastened and secured promptly and correctly.
I'm going to be checking. I'm going to be checking from now on. All right. Well, with all that said, I wish I had some rum event exploits to share, but unfortunately, not too many of those come in my way to Nashville. But we do have some very exciting Madeira rum stuff to talk about. Before we get into it, John, a question I wanted to ask you:
Hmm.
why Madeira rum? We could have gone to a lot of different places for our next guide episode. Why did we choose this one?
Well, I don't want to speak for you, but I can speak for me in
Yeah.
terms of saying it's an interesting place where, if you think of the island, is not very large, number one, comparatively to a lot of other places that make rum, right? And they have multiple distilleries on this island. They have a very long history of making rum and cane growing, right? Back into
Yep.
I think, the 15th century
Yep.
type of cane growing. So, there's tradition there, there is expertise, and yet it still has, I would say, almost a feel of like exotic to it in terms of rum.
A
It's
little
its own
unknown,
thing.
a
Yeah,
little
a little harder
mysterious.
to, right, to get, especially here in the United States. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't see it very often. So I think there's a little mystique around it, like you said, and I think that's why I think for us, it's interesting and worthy to explore and to let people know more about it, because despite all that, we do know it's really well made quality rum that they're making there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think that's
what
well
about you?
said.
Yeah.
I think I would plus one all of those. And as you said, we don't get a ton of Madeira rum here in the US. I think the brands that people may be familiar with, the William Hinton brand is one of
Hmm.
them. We're going to talk about the distillery that comes from. And then we're starting to see some more rums from O Reizinho Distillery,
Hmm.
which is a very small distillery, but some independent bottlers are starting to get a hold of some of their stuff. So we're seeing more of that. And I think kind of so we always had an interest around it. We've had multiple people on the podcast who have taken extended trips to Madeira and visited a lot of the distilleries. Our episode with Peter Holland, through his work at that boutique rum company, they've released a number of Madeira rums. So we got kind of a taste of the Madeira experience when we talked to Peter. And then when we had Richard Nicholson on to share with us his amazing rum journey around the world, I think he took multiple trips to Madeira during that.
Hmm.
And so he gave us a little snapshot. So we've shared little, snapshots, like I was saying,
Yeah.
about Madeira from folks who have traveled there over the history of the show. But we kind of wanted to do our own little deep dive from, our homes here. Unfortunately, we weren't able to fly over to Madeira and go do all this in person. But we kind of see these episodes as sort of an introduction overview of a place's style. We're going to talk about each of the distilleries that are making rum. We had a Rumcast patron, a listener, Kyle from DC, part of the DC Rum Rebels group there. He and his wife recently went to Madeira. He brought back a number of rums and got some samples of those to us from almost all of the different distilleries. Not quite, but we are going to taste through some of those as we talk about the distillery. So and also Madeira, we're going to have Kyle on this episode to
Yeah.
share just a little bit of his perspective as an American traveling to Madeira, what that was like. He was able to visit O Reizinho while he was there, so give us a little more on the ground reporting there.
It's like a correspondent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was a Rumcast correspondent, and he didn't even know while he was on the trip. He also brought back a Madeira Mystery sample for us. He did not tell us what it was. All we knew was that it was unaged spirit, and we tasted that and had our own guesses of what it was, and he revealed it to us live on the show. So we've got that at the end of the episode. We're also Madeira has it's their rum that they make there is considered rum agricole.
Yeah.
And which is kind of throws people off a little bit because rum agricole typically just comes from French overseas
Right.
departments, and
Hmm.
Madeira is not one of those. It's an autonomous, was it region? What is
Portuguese.
it? It's an autonomous region of Portugal.
Hmm.
So, but it is included. Like if you look at the rum agricole, regulations, it'll be like French overseas departments and
Hmm.
Madeira. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
tacked on there. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. But Madeira also has its own GI and a really interesting certification process that I was kind of boning up on in preparation for this show. So I'm going to kind of pull out some fun facts about that because there's just some kind of quirky, interesting stuff about how they decide what can be considered a Madeira rum and what can't be. So looking forward to getting into that. So we'll start with a little background, a little bit about the GI, and then kind of dive into the distilleries.
Yep.
But before we do that,
Yeah, I was gonna say one more thing before we go to break is, and I know we're gonna talk about this, but another reason why we want to kind of highlight Madeira rum is because I think it often gets overshadowed by Madeira wine, right?
yeah,
When
that's a
when
good
when
call.
people talk about Madeira, a lot of times they're thinking about the fortified wine that comes from the island, which is so popular, and it's popular for a reason. It's good, right? It's good
Mhm.
stuff, and there's many rums that are ex Madeira cask finished, and so that's I think where most people kind of think. And
Yeah,
so
for
I
sure.
think it's good for us to kind of bring the rum to light just a little bit more. A lot of people that listen to our show are already going to be familiar to some degree, and hopefully we can expand on that knowledge a little. But, I'm hoping that maybe a few people see this post online and go, oh, Madeira makes rum, and then, figure out more about it.
Yeah, that's the goal. All right, well, we'll take a quick break and then we will dive into all things Madeira rum. All right, we are back to kick off the Rumcast Guide to Madeira Rum. John, you alluded, or not alluded to, you mentioned some of Madeira's very long history with rum
Hmm.
earlier. And I wanted to ask, first of all, because I think this is kind of a fun question, particularly for Americans. Do you know where Madeira is?
I do, but for a weird reason, maybe.
Okay.
My wife about 6 months ago, maybe a little longer than that, told me that I was terrible at geography.
She challenged your
She
geography
did.
skills.
She did. Well, because I think I mentioned I have a lot of collecting habits. I don't know. Apparently I'm
Yeah,
like a hoarder. And so I collect like money from different places, like actual currency, banknotes. And
yeah.
so I'm like, ooh, cool. This is one, and I don't know where this country is. And my wife is seeing this and she's like, you don't know where that is? Like you're terrible at geography.
What
And
country
so
was it?
like
Canada?
Comoros. No, something in Africa. Uh
It was a joke, John. I know you know where
okay.
Canada is.
Sorry, that went right over my head as I was trying to remember the country.
That's usually my
Um,
job to miss the jokes. Yeah.
but so, anyways, long story short, yes, she challenged me. She's like, "Yeah, I didn't realize you were terrible at geography," and so I started trying to bone up on it. And so, in doing that,
You just studying maps like you're studying for the geography bee in eighth grade or something?
I don't know what to tell you, Will. Apparently I'm a weird guy and I find things fascinating. And once I dive into a subject, kind of like rum, I don't tend to let it go. Like I want
I
to know
actually
everything.
I don't think that's that weird. And anytime I see a place now and I think to myself, like, where is that again? I do now go and look it up. And it is just crazy how many, like, this sounds stupid, but
Yeah.
how big and vast the world is and how many different little places there are that
Yep.
you just
Yep.
completely overlook, especially as an American, because we're kind of off to
Exactly.
ourselves
Right.
over here.
Right. So when you're
Yeah,
talking about, Liechtenstein or Laos or like, these
right.
countries that may not be as typically like, yeah, duh, we know where China is and Japan and Australia, those
Yeah,
type of things. But yeah, Comoros. Where should you point to a map and tell me where in Africa Comoros is? Probably not. It's
no,
difficult for most Americans to do. That said, to answer your question about Madeira, I do know where it is, and I do know that it's closer to Africa than it is to Spain and Portugal. So I
that's
think
right.
that's what you were looking for.
It is. It is also it's more than one island. So
Yes,
the
it's an
biggest island
archipelago.
is called Madeira, but it is an archipelago. There's a
Hmm.
smaller island called Porto Santo that is also part of Madeira, and then there's the Desertas Islands, which I think are small. And based on the name, perhaps deserted. I don't know. I don't know for sure. Maybe they were when they were first discovered or
Or
something,
they
but
just have really sweet treats there.
yeah, it could be. It could be that kind of dessert. Yeah. But yeah, for those who aren't in front of a map, it's east of Morocco, basically, and north of the Canary Islands, and then
Hmm.
southeast from Portugal. And as John said, it is a bit closer to Africa than it is to Portugal.
Yeah,
And but there's plenty of rum there, as we've said. So, John, do you know why there is rum there?
that's a better question. So I think I have a half answer here for you. And I'm going to start by going way back, which is before rum, which is also because, I'm an ancient history person and a
That's
buff with
right.
that. The Romans actually were on Madeira as well.
Wow,
So
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah, and the Canary Islands actually. So there
Interesting.
there was a little bit of a presence in some of the ancient history there that belongs to that. I may be confusing a little bit of that there, but I know that there's been a presence there for a very long time. So it was known in the ancient world, right?
That's
Which is
interesting.
interesting.
Yeah, at the top of the Madeira Wikipedia page, it says that when the Portuguese first arrived in the early 1400s, that it was uninhabited. Although I guess the Roman Empire was far gone by the 1400s, so perhaps that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, and that's kind or go ahead. I think you were
Yeah, I
continuing
was
with
gonna
the
say
thought
so.
there.
So from there, obviously we know there's not rum production happening way back when, but in the I think it was 15th century, like you said, the Portuguese are now looking for these different islands, and they have this island that grows sugarcane, right?
They bring
Or they
sugarcane
bring,
there.
sorry, I
Yeah.
should have said bring sugarcane, and it like takes off, right?
Yes.
Because it's like the
Yes.
ideal place for sugarcane growing, which if I could be wrong here, but Will, I remember it being like from somewhere like Sicily is where they got this sugarcane from,
I don't
which
know. I don't
I
remember
find interesting.
exactly, but I think in general, sugarcane did take in east or west, no, east to west. By the way, I said earlier that it's east of Morocco. It is not. It is west of Morocco.
West.
So I'm sure there were people screaming and calling me an idiot
It's
during
not
that.
in the
But
Sahara
yeah,
Desert.
west
Yeah.
west of Morocco and southwest of Portugal. Just gotta edit that one out. But Yeah, so sugarcane, I think in general took an east to west journey. So
Right.
it could be possible that it took a stop in Sicily first. But yeah, so it's introduced in the 1400s and flourishes, as you said. It did like production basically winds down sort of over the next few centuries. It's not like they had
Right.
this long, continuous, hugely booming sugar industry there. And there were kind of a variety of reasons for that. You had competition from other sugar producing countries. Like I think Brazil was a big deal when they started producing sugar. Then there's like disease for the, cane and stuff like that, introduction of other crops. So there's kind of like stopping and starting with cane cultivation all the way up to the 19th century. Again, there's more disease that kind of, almost wipes it out. Then there's a brief resurgence in the 20th century before it shrinks back down again. And by the 80s or so, it's just like a tiny fraction sugarcane cultivation of what it once was. And it's really just been in kind of the last 20 years or so that there's been a little bit of a resurgence with support and incentives from the government. The amount of land dedicated to cane cultivation is actually almost double what it was in the 80s now. So, and
Wow.
keep in mind, like in the 80s, it was a tiny amount compared to originally how it was, but it has doubled since then. So, one of the interesting things though is that most of the like if people are imagining these like big vast sugarcane fields controlled by a handful of people, it's not like that at all. Most plots are like very small because the island has really steep terrain, and so the fields are almost kind of like terraced, sort of, is how they grow them,
Yeah.
and they have these really small individual plots. And also because of that, most of the harvesting is done manually because it's too hard to use, heavy machinery and stuff like that on that kind of terrain. But to give you an idea of just how many of these little plots are, I was reading about Engenho del Norte, which is one of the distilleries we'll be talking about. I believe it's the biggest distillery on the island. And this was from a Rum Porter article. And they said that Engenho del Norte works with around 500 farmers to supply the sugarcane, which was just like insane to me that there'd be that many sort of individual plots and stuff. But I think that gives a good idea to sort of what cane cultivation looks like there relative to some of the other places that we've seen. And also, if you're thinking in the direction of like single varietals and what kinds of
Hmm.
cane are they using, when you look at sort of the Madeira Rum GI, it basically points out three varietals. One of them is called Canica or Yuba cane. And then
Hmm.
there's two others that have very non-romantic names. One is called POJ 2725, I think also known as purple cane. And then there's NCO
I think
310.
Elon Musk named that one. Yeah.
Something like that. But I did see a video though with Pedro from O Reizinho, and he makes a reference to six varietals. So I don't know if there's some going on, but basically I think I think all producers in general use kind of a mix of cane because again they're coming from all these different small plots. So just kind of I thought that was interesting. And all rum on Madeira is made from cane juice. So, there you don't really see molasses rums or anything or any kind of like crystallized sugar. I haven't heard or seen anything about cane syrup rums or anything like that. And the vast majority of what's made right now is unaged rum that gets used in what they call poncha, which is sort of like
Hmm.
their version of the tea punch. I think it's actually made pretty similarly to tea punch. It's a mixture of rum, lemon juice, maybe
Hmm.
orange juice sometimes can be in there too. And then it's either, a raw sugar or honey sometimes. And it's kind of like whipped with kind of one of those wooden, it's sort of like a muddler. I don't know what they call it there, but similar, I think, in a lot of ways to the tea punch and traditionally served without ice, also like the tea punch, though I think I've read that ice is becoming more common. So, yeah, you can see some of the connections to
Yeah.
the French Caribbean,
French.
but
Hmm.
also like very distinct differences too.
Yeah. And you were mentioning earlier how it kind of got pushed into being an agricole, which I think is worthy of a little bit more research. Probably not from me or us necessarily, but like somebody out there, I would love to know a little bit more about like how did that happen and it kind of got lumped in there, given the
Yeah.
differences. I mean, we see the similarities, but like I don't know. There's a weird argument there of like, well, clearly Hawaii doesn't have the same tradition or the same history, but there's problems with that. So, I don't know. There's a little bit of
I would
a
I would I
conversation.
would I would guess, and I wish I knew the answer. I was trying to find that out in the course of this research, but couldn't find anything very satisfying.
Hmm.
And if I had to guess, I would guess it's related to like trade agreements or
Right.
politics in some ways, economic reasons,
Hmm.
that I think that's the way a lot of these things get done. I know
Yeah.
the reason why cachaça is recognized in the US has a lot to do with that. So
Makes
yes,
sense.
probably something interesting there for sure. On that note though, we should talk about the differences in the Madeira GI and also like what actually makes Madeira rum a Madeira rum? How do they judge that? Like what rules have they put together that producers have to follow? I know we've been talking
Yeah.
about the Jamaica rum GI a lot lately, so this is a topic that's probably on people's minds. And you can read their GI. It's actually like I've read some GIs over the years and they can get pretty dry
Yeah.
and like difficult to get through and very technical. This one is not very technical. It's pretty interesting. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but there's really if you look at like the Martinique Agricole AOC, it's like so many little things and like stuff about distillation and like proof coming off the still and like, growing areas and all this stuff. The Madeira one is much more laid back, I would say. It does have to be made from sugarcane juice. It has to have
Hmm.
a minimum alcoholic strength of 37.5% ABV, and they have some sort of like traditional Madeira rum categories. They have natural Madeira rum, which is essentially unaged Madeira rum.
Right. Right.
Um, and then they have aged Madeira rum. And within aged, this is the first thing that struck me as like, this is kind of, I remember, I think Richard Nicholson was the first person to tell me about this, maybe a year or so ago, because I didn't know about it. So, one thing that's easy to understand, they have a 3-year minimum age requirement. If you're going to do an aged rum, it has to age for 3 years. But if you have a 4-year-old rum, you can't just release it as a 4-year-old rum because they do this odd thing where they have specific age in
Like
designations. So
categories or yeah.
it's not even a category. It's like
It's a
a length,
step.
I guess. So you can have a 3-year, a 6-year,
Yeah.
9-year, 12-year, 15, 18, 21, 25. And they have certain names for some of these. Like at 6, you can also call it reserve. At 12, you can call it old reserve. At 15, special reserve. At
Yeah.
18, superior reserve. Do you know what comes after superior reserve, John?
Grand.
You're actually 100% correct. It's Grand Reserve at 21. And then do you know 25? Do you know what it is?
Very grand.
It's premium
Oh,
Grand
darn.
Reserve. You're
That's
close.
premium. Oh, and then 28 is ultra premium.
Probably. There's not a 28 yet. But so it's very interesting to me that if I have a 5-year-old Madeira rum and I release it and put an age statement on it, I have to say it's 3 years old, is my interpretation of how that
Yeah.
works. If I have an 8-year-old rum, I have to release it as a 6-year-old rum. So I think that Madeira wine has a similar thing going on. And so
Could
I,
be.
I
Yeah.
think that a lot of the existing infrastructure for Madeira wines GI probably informed a lot of the Madeira rum GI because it got some heavy updates, I think, in 2021. So this is the sort of, latest. Some of these are like fairly recent things.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
they used to have another category called beneficiado, I think it was, which was a sweetened type of rum. They would allow
Hmm.
you to add some cane honey to it,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that is no longer in the GI. So I'm guessing that that is a practice that is in decline. The only things that you can add to Madeira rum are caramel for adjusting color,
Color. Mm.
and so like neutral spirit caramel, not like sweetening caramel. And then you can also add water as well, of course. Um, one interesting thing I noticed, which is a difference from some of the Caribbean rum GIs, which is that it says the distillation, processing, aging, and other operations intended for the production, as well as bottling, must be carried out within the region defined, which is essentially just Madeira.
Madeira. Yeah.
So we did just have the aging conversation about Jamaica rum.
Right.
Can't does it need to be aged at origin in order to be a Jamaica rum? That's the change that was made to the Jamaican GI that is
Right.
now, I think, kind of being fought against, um, and by one specific producer. So this one has aging, but it also has that bottling has to take place there. And that's something, the Jamaica rum GI, I believe, doesn't require bottling in Jamaica. I don't think the Barbados rum GI does either. So just kind of and when I saw that, my eyebrows raised a little bit,
Yeah.
because you don't always see that.
Yeah, I think that's interesting to go back and look at and see how people are selecting the things that they feel are most important in a GI.
Yeah. But
And yeah, go ahead.
it sounds like they really want to, like, all aspects of production be in Madeira, which is, probably good for the economy there.
Yeah.
And yeah, but so the most interesting thing to me about this GI though, John, is it's kind of governed by this government organization called IVBOM, which is the Instituto do Vino do Bordado e do Artesanato de Madeira, which is
Mm,
translates to the Institute of Wine, Embroidery, and Crafts of Madeira.
embroidery.
Yeah, so
Wow.
they kind of govern some local artisanal processes from wine to, the arts, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And they essentially define sort of what a Madeira rum needs to taste like. And so I was very interested to see, like, okay, I wonder how they codified what a Madeira rum needs to taste like, because they actually have a kind of tasting panel that every Madeira rum has to go through before it can be called a Madeira rum. So it's literally people who taste it, and like they do a chemical analysis and stuff, but they also just
Okay.
do old fashioned tasting, and they decide,
Interesting.
is this a Madeira rum or is this not a Madeira rum? And when you look at the characteristics that they have, and again, I'll link to all this, you can see it.
Yeah.
It says organoleptic characteristics:
Okay.
appearance, clear, so can't be cloudy. That's,
Right.
straightforward. Color,
Okay.
it can range from colorless to topaz, which I thought was an interesting choice. I was actually like, I don't know what color topaz is, so I had to Google it, and it turns
I,
out it's like a lot of different colors,
I was
but
gonna say, yeah, topaz can come in a lot of different colors. Yeah.
there are a lot that I saw that are kind of a dark brown, coppery kind of color too. So I'm guessing that's what they
There's a
mean.
lot
But
of
it was just,
variance there.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was an interesting. It's almost like,
Descriptive. Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
pick a color that like has some wiggle room on it. I don't know if that was the thing. Um, for
Is this topaz to
aroma,
you? This looks topaz to you, right?
yeah,
This is topaz.
exactly. For aroma, the only description they have of Jerome of aroma is a single Latin phrase, which made me think of you. Do you
Okay.
know what it might be?
Um, no, not yet.
So I actually don't know how to pronounce the first word. I'm just going to guess, and you can correct me because I think you'll
Okay.
probably know. Sui generis.
Ah, okay. Yeah, sui generis is right. I think you're
What
good
does that
there with it.
translate to, John? Do you know?
Uh, of its own, right? Like
Unique.
it's yes.
Yes.
It's of its own type is kind
So
of
the
what sui
aroma
generis means. Yeah.
must be unique.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
that's the only descriptor that producers have to go off of. And then for flavor, they say sui generis again and alcoholic. So there's got to be alcohol in it, I guess. So this is what the tasting panel lays out. But then actually there are specific like scoring methods that they take the rum through. And I want to actually pull this up so you can see it. And if people are watching on YouTube, they can kind of see these documents in real time. Um, so they have kind of like three scoring rounds that they go through. They have an aroma and flavor scoring round, and there's a scale of 1 to 5. It must
Okay.
have a minimum score of 3 and a maximum score of 5. So 1 and 2 on the scale are labeled as
Don't pass. Yeah.
non-characteristic,
Yeah.
and 3 and above is labeled as characteristic
Right.
aroma and flavor.
Right.
So if you don't
This is
get
like
three
the
or
grading
above,
scale, right? F and D, you don't pass, right?
exactly, yeah,
C, B, or A, you pass.
that's
Yeah.
true. I didn't notice
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm.
This one is very interesting. They also judge on age. And so this is again a 5 point scale. It must be 3 or above to match. And it basically says it needs to have, the age needs to kind of match up with the age that it is labeled with. I think. So it's like the way I'm interpreting this is if it's a 3-year-old rum, for example, you're scoring it on how much it tastes like a 3-year-old rum. So I guess if you think it tastes more like a 1-year-old rum, even though it is 3 years old, you could score this a 2 or a 1, which means doesn't correspond to the indicated age. Or if
Yeah.
it's like this really tastes like a 3-year rum, you might score it a 5, which 3, 4, and 5 are all corresponds to the indicated age. So that one was
Wow.
really interesting to me because you and I talk a lot about how age can be deceiving. And, just
Yeah.
because a rum tastes older or younger than what's on the label, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. Well, especially given that they're kind of doing this in multiples of three. So you have a 5-year-old rum that's supposed to taste like a 3-year-old rum, right?
Right?
Because it's
That's
going to
true.
be
It's going to be labeled a 3. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
So
interesting.
it could be 5 years and 11 months, and
Right.
it's got to be a 3. I
Even
mean,
though it
I
tastes
think
more like a 6, maybe. Yeah.
right, which I
Yeah.
assume producers at that point would say, nope, we can't send this to the
Right.
people
We'll
until
wait
we
one
wait
more
one
month.
more month. Right.
Yeah.
Which
Um,
makes sense. But
I,
wow, I don't know how to feel about
I
this
guess
yet.
I think the argument for it would be if you're going for consistency, right? If you really want something that is labeled Madeira rum, 3 years old, that you don't want a ton of variance in terms of the age
Sure.
profile of the rum. So I could get it from that sense. It does seem kind of overly prescriptive to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
it's
you've
like
got
overly
different producers on
prescriptive.
the island in different microclimates and
Yeah,
terroirs and all of this stuff. And
yeah,
I feel like that would be hard to do unless you're really forcing yourself to get there down that road, right? Which, like you
right.
said, that offers benefits. I get that, but it also makes it challenging.
hmm And then there's one more. There's the quality
Okay.
scale, which this is actually a scale of 1 to 10.
Oh my God.
You hate that it jumps to 10, don't you?
Yes. I just like it. Okay. All right. I'm listening. Go ahead.
So the minimum score here in order for your own to pass is a 5. The way these numbers break down, 1 or 2 means bad, 3 or 4 means mediocre, 5 is sufficient, 6 or 7 is good, 8 or 9 is very good, and 10 is excellent. So your rum at minimum must be sufficient in order to pass. But again, there's not necessarily a lot of like descriptions of, what separates a
Yeah.
mediocre rum from a sufficient rum and that sort of thing. So pretty interesting all in all. Again, I'll link to this document in the show notes so you can check it out. Also, one thing I didn't mention that was kind of one of my favorite things. I want to make sure I get the phrasing right. So when they're talking about these tasting panels, these tastings take place at the IVBOM Wine Laboratory. And
Okay.
in the documentation, they actually refer to it as the IVBOM Chamber of Tasters.
It sounds like a Harry Potter
I know.
episode.
IVBOM and the Chamber of Tasters. Yeah, exactly. Madeira Rum and the Chamber of Tasters. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like at some point we need to worm our way inside this Chamber of Tasters. I just want
Yes.
to watch. They don't have to include us in the process. I just want to watch. Maybe we can have a Portuguese translator to tell us what
Yeah,
they're
that would
talking
be
about. I
necessary.
just want to be
Yeah.
a fly on the wall of the Chamber of Tasters.
Oh, did I miss how many tasters there are? Sorry.
I didn't see a specific number, so I'm not exactly sure. It obviously sounds like multiple tasters, but I don't know how big the group is.
Right. I feel like, that's an interesting piece of this because, everywhere you go, there's corruption in things. And I'm not saying at all or claiming that there's corruption in Madeira Rum's process here. But
Sure.
you have to imagine that if somebody's like, this is reading mediocre to me, and I might need $10 to get it to sufficient, like,
Well, I want to know how they settle disagreements too amongst themselves. If one person's at a 4 and everyone else is at a 6, is the one time I did a tasting competition, you did have sort of a time to confer at the end once people had kind of settled on their scores. And they did encourage you if there was a situation where like just one person was way below everyone else, it's
right.
kind of um good protocol to sort of have a discussion and not necessarily like pressure the person into changing theirs, but just, then you can kind of make a case a little bit if there's like a huge difference of opinion. So I just kind of wonder like what that process is
Yeah.
like.
I mean, I think a better way to do it would be to take 5 tasters and then throw away the high and the low, right?
Hmm.
Or something along those lines.
Maybe they do that.
Maybe they do, because I assume they've been doing this for a while and they know what they're doing. So
Yeah.
they've worked all this stuff out. But yes, I agree with you. I would love to just learn a little bit more about that process and kind of see why the heck did you jump to a 10-point scale after doing the first categories as fives. I need to know. Was it a complaint from somebody that was just like, no, you scored my rum a 2 and there's just no way? And they're like, well, would you feel better with a 4 out of
Yeah.
10?
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems odd.
There are also a lot of these little carved out rules basically saying, for producers' sake, like, hey, anytime someone from IvBomb wants, they can show up and just pull something off
Yeah.
your bottling line and taste
Yeah.
it, or they can go up to any cask they want and taste it. And it's written in this way that like it was almost like if I were writing this in order to give myself carte blanche to drink as much great rum as I wanted, this is like how I would word it if I like if I worked for IvBomb.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like there's some fun people at IvBomb who it seems like really like rum, and I would love to talk to them. So it's kind of on that's maybe the Rumcast bucket list to get
I,
to get
yeah.
the Chamber of Tasters on the Rumcast.
Yeah. I'm imagining they have like, like the FBI like credentials, like IBOM,
Yeah.
let us in. Uh
I was like Chamber of Tasters conjures for me almost like, you know, religious ceremonial type wear, like robes and things like that they would wear to this. So that's kind of how I'm imagining it.
Chants in the background.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, one final interesting thing I noticed in the GI is it says the sale of rum da Madeira in bulk is only permitted upon prior authorization from IvBomb, which I found to be pretty interesting. Again, it sounds like they just want really tight control over what is going to be labeled this. And obviously, if you're selling bulk unaged rum de
Hmm.
Madeira elsewhere, although if it's not bottled there, then I suppose they couldn't use the indication. But yeah, so I don't know. That was just kind of an interesting quirk.
There's a lot of quirks in there.
A lot of quirks in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but with that in mind, should we start talking about some distilleries and tasting some rums?
Yeah. I think so. I've got one in my glass that's been stirring around and it's kind of been waving around at me. It's the nose is coming out of the glass, even though it's about 6 inches or so away from me to the left and like hitting me.
Yeah.
It's pungent.
Is this the O Reizinho rum?
It is. It is the O
Okay.
Reizinho unaged.
So we're starting with what I believe is the smallest, or certainly in the conversation for smallest distillery in Madeira called O Reizinho, as we have discussed. John, do you know what O Reizinho means in Portuguese?
My Latin is better than my Portuguese, so that means
You know a little
no.
Spanish though, and there's a connection here between the Spanish word
Oh,
for this and the
I hadn't
Portuguese word
thought
for
of that.
this.
Now I'm more interested to know, and I still don't.
I see your screen flashing like you're looking this up. You're supposed to guess.
I was trying to no, I was trying to get to your notes. Oh no, I get it now. I see your notes had it, so yes.
Yeah, it's Little
Uh,
King. Little King is what it means. So yeah, I think
I see.
Reizinho similar to I believe Reina, or I know that's king or queen
Yeah.
in Spanish, I believe. So
Well, even the Latin Rex, right?
there you go. There you
Yeah.
go.
But and I'm assuming here that Ino is the
Little.
diminutive.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I say exactly like I know. I just that makes sense. That's probably it. But interesting backstory. So the Little King name it pays homage to the great grandfather of Pedro Ferreira, who is the current owner of the distillery. So his great grandfather was born all the way back in 1875. He was born premature and was very small. So he was taken to the doctor, and the midwife kind of rushed him to be baptized by the local priest because they thought that he might die. So in the middle of the night, the priest baptizes the child,
Hmm.
and he said he will be a little king in heaven, according to this family legend.
I see.
And
I
so
see.
that's where that comes from. But also, I bring that up because it speaks to rum distilling has been in Pedro's family for a very long time. He didn't start like commercially selling this until 2013, but there were multiple generations of people in his family distilling, making Madeira rum. And so it's basically the distillery's in like kind of a garage attached to his house. It's pretty cool because I know this is where Kyle went, and to get a tour, you basically like send an email and like Pedro welcomes you and shows you around. But like he has cane delivered to his driveway, basically crushes it on site, and
Wow.
he's got two, I believe, two pot stills that are I know at least one of them is wood fired based on the pictures I've seen, and the brand like the distillery O Reizinho, so relatively new. Um, they have a few different unaged rums, a variety of 3-year-old rums, aged in different cask types. Then they also have a 6-year rum that they've done. What we
Hmm.
have here is one of the unaged rums. So
Yeah.
yes, this is the Orizinho Agricola da Madeira, 45% ABV. So I think probably kind of the standard flagship unaged
Yeah.
bottling. You said it was jumping out of the glass though, so tell me
I
what you're
do, and
feeling.
especially this is 45%, so it's not super high strength, and to have a nose that is
Flavor
um
packed. Yeah.
yeah, is fairly uncommon, I would say. I'm getting a lot of, I think, cognates to some of the Mexican unaged rums that we've
Hmm.
tried.
I could see that.
And it's a very kind of savory type of smell. I'm not getting a whole lot of sweet here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was tasting through this yesterday and scribbled down
Hmm.
some notes, and the first thing I wrote was just very rich, which, like you said, is
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
45%. It's just a very rich nose. I guess maybe it's from those little pot stills or what, and it's almost like
Little King
stew,
pot
like
stills.
stew, like yeah. It reminded me of like a stew that's been simmering all
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but there is kind of olive brine, but I also get like when it kind of opens up, I get some of the sweeter characteristics. I get kind of like a salted melon. I get like apple juice for sure in there as well. So it's really it's powerful, and
Yeah.
that's just
Like
the
a
nose.
hot apple juice, I can see it. We're not used to drinking apple juice, outside of the fridge.
Like a
Yeah.
mold apple juice perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. I also get the briny characteristic to it. But I'm getting this kind of savory dominance for me that reminds me of like the Paranubes or Bend or those type of rums. I don't have that in front of me, so I don't want to do like a complete characteristic. It's just about
Mhm.
what is it recalling for me.
Yeah.
And maybe some cognates of Clarin, but again, it's much more savory than the Clarins that I can recall.
Oh, interesting. I wouldn't go that far. To me, Clarins are kind of like well, to play off the what we're talking about
Yeah.
here, the king of savory flavor in cane juice rum.
Hmm.
This one to me is it's definitely savory, but particularly once I start drinking it, I do get a little bit more of that kind of sweet, salty melon, a little bit of
Yeah.
the apple, but definitely a lot of olives, as is common in a lot of cane juice rums. But it's like thick, round, it's concentrated flavor. I think for 45% ABV, it's really flavorful.
It is. And yet, as thick and round as the flavor is, I would say the mouthfeel is on the thinner side. Meaning, I would have blind guessed that this might be column still, because one of the things I look for in column versus pot is the mouthfeel. And I feel like
Hmm.
typically I get more of an oily or a thick mouthfeel from pot stills, and a little bit, and this doesn't hold true in every case, but a little bit less of that in the column stills. So I'm for as much flavor as it brings, it still has a little bit of a thinness in the texture. I don't know what else to say with it.
I think I might say lightness a little more.
Yes,
Because
it almost evaporates.
thin sounds kind of negative.
Negative.
I
Yeah,
don't know if you mean it that way or not.
I don't actually. I'm actually really enjoying this. So thank you for pointing that out. Lightness is a good way to put it, because it actually is evaporating very quickly
Yeah.
in my mouth, in a pleasurable way. Like
Mm.
sometimes we say, "Oh yeah, it's there and it's gone," like no finish, no nothing. And I don't think this has a long finish from what I can tell so far. But I don't mind the flavors that are packed into it while it's there in your mouth. And does this kind of very light evaporating kind of poof, it's gone in an
Yeah.
interesting way.
Yeah, it's not a super long finish, but I'm kind of left with the sweeter qualities, I think, on the
Yes.
finish. Like a little bit of that light apple, maybe almost like a watermelon rind kind of something in that vein. But yeah, it's a really nice rum. It's great to be able to drink something like this from a small producer. And this was actually my first experience with O Reizinho's unaged rums. I'd had a
Yeah.
few aged stuff, and we're about to taste another aged one now. But yeah, really impressed with this one.
I really like it as well. I just
Little
to make
King,
sure.
big flavor.
I like it.
But let's look at this aged one. I just have a little tiny bit left of the sample because I've been, spoiler alert, I've been enjoying it.
Yeah.
But this is O Reizinho Agricola da Madeira, 3 year, 62.6% ABV. I'm guessing that's cask strength.
The amount of again, must is the best word I can come up with right now, is very high and dense for me.
I
We talk. Go
again,
ahead.
like very rich was what I wrote first thing for the nose on the unaged. For this one, the first thing I wrote was thick. It is a thick smelling nose to
It
me.
is. It is. It feels like, if you accidentally spilled this on you, it's going to stay with you for a while. Um,
It's
oh
almost
my
to me like
gosh.
you took olives and covered it in like a really rich honey or something like that, is kind of what it reminds me of.
Yeah, there's something in there else. I agree with those two, but something else in there. I'm trying to see if I can get to it.
There's a strong rubberiness to it as well for me.
It's just so dense.
Yeah.
It's like my nose is having to like do that to get the smell to go into it. Sorry if that was gross.
It's like drinking a thick milkshake, where it like
Yes.
won't come up through the straw.
Yes, but smelling. The smelling
Yeah.
version of that.
Which makes me wonder if this is in fact just 3 years old. Maybe this is a 5 year old, 3 year old
Right.
Madeira rum.
Oh man, it's really great.
Yeah, I know. The the big note I get on the entry is like huge salted caramel flavor.
Mm-hmm.
It really hits like the saltiness of it is really intense, but the sweetness matches it. And so it's that really pleasing effect, like biting into like a great salted caramel, that balance of salty and sweet. And
Yep.
there is kind of a savory backbone to it. I do still get like if you paired olives with something sweet, it
Yep.
would be kind of like this. Um,
The other thing I'm just kind of surprised by is, for a quote unquote 3-year-old rum, it brings a lot of oak
mhm.
and a lot of the tannin there.
I should have asked Kyle this. This tastes to me like something that was aged in a fortified wine cask. So I'm wondering if
I
this
would
was
have said
aged
so too.
in a Madeira cask because I know that's very popular naturally
Right.
amongst producers. I'm actually going to see if I can look this up real quick.
You have to imagine it's the high percentage of what they're aging in there.
Yes.
And this, because it's so different than your typical like ex bourbon aging, I'm just I'm gonna I guess that this is completely aged in Madeira.
You're actually 100% right. It was
Yep.
aged in a Madeira wine cask. So
Yep.
there you go. What do you think I'm just looking at this at one store in the UK. Um, what do you think this retails for? It's cask
So
strength.
it's a cask strength rum.
Hmm.
It's 3+ years. Um 79.
So it's 91 euros. So a little bit
Okay.
pricier than that. I gotta say though, like based on the experience of it, I don't think that's a bad deal.
It's not.
Like this is a really cool rum. And I had another single cask rum from them not too long ago that I wasn't a huge fan of. That like rubbery kind of character was really out of balance in the other one, but in this one it all comes together. And what did you just think of like a crazy note or something? You're just laughing to yourself
I'm
over
sorry.
there.
I did, and I forget we're also on video here, so you can see this, and now I have to say it. I was debating whether or not to even say this, because one of the last tasting notes I had was vomit and gross, and I think a lot of people were texting us like, "Oh my god." And
Right.
now I'm going to get a reputation because the note I'm about to give you is also sort of weird and gross.
Okay.
And that is, it's it's got like a body odor funk thing going.
Mm, a BO,
And
a BO note.
yes, not in a such a like terrible way of like, ugh, get me away from that. But there's something to the denseness and something in the, it's more in the nose than in the palate
Yeah.
that just reminds me of when you walk by somebody who's been heavily sweating.
Okay.
I don't know. This is
I
terrible.
see where you're coming from. There was actually, I don't know if I mentioned this on the podcast before, but when my family was moving from Washington to Alabama, it's a very
Hmm.
long drive. And either myself or my sister bought some Bubblicious gum. This was in the this was around 1997 or 8, I think.
Yeah.
And my mom ended up banning the gum from the car because she said it smelled like armpits, and she started calling it armpit gum. And I remember, like, as I was tasting it, thinking like, I see where she's coming from, but also this gum tastes really good. And it was kind of like a tropical fruit sort of flavor, and I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes I get that in Jamaican rums as well, so
Dude.
I kind of see where you're coming from.
Yeah. I'm weirdly, I'm getting a little armpit. Um, I think I would
In an
hope.
enjoyable way,
I
though.
was gonna say, let me qualify that by saying, hey, if this was my BO, if this was how my armpit smelled, I'm doing pretty good, right? I'm on the upper echelon of the BO scale, right? Because
I'm gonna clip.
it's not
I'm gonna
entirely unpleasurable.
I'm gonna clip your earlier confession about your fly being unzipped, and then clip you talking about wishing your BO smelled like this, and just create this John Gulla compilation of
No,
of
no, no,
of
no.
weird things.
Um,
Um, well, on the note, on the finish, I get a note that's almost kind of like fried plantains, sort of, almost like a
okay,
tostones kind of note.
yeah.
Um,
Because of the saltiness, I can see that, and
yeah,
then a little bit of that fried, yes. And
yeah.
then honey, like you said, I get
Hmm.
honey too.
It's really good. I just killed that sample.
It's like someone was working all day to fry tostones in the direct sunlight and then covered themselves in honey. And the smell of that person is what this nose is.
Pedro, if you're listening, feel free to use these notes
I'm never going to get invited to
on your
his house.
website. Maybe put them up on a plaque in the garage where the distillery is. All right, let's move on. I think next up we have the Vinha Alta distillery.
The high vine, right? I assume. Vinha
Oh wait,
Alta?
actually no, not Vinha Alta.
No?
We're going Engenhos do Norte. So we're going from one of the smaller distilleries to what is the largest distillery on the island, founded in 1927. And actually, when it was founded, there's a good Rum Porter article about this distillery, and it says that it was built in 1927 following the unification of some 50 distilleries or mills that were existing on the island at the time. So that
Oh,
really just kind of like
okay.
paints a picture of how many distinct producers there were at a time. And there's a lot of brands that come from this distillery: Rum North, Bronca, 970, 980, Lido rum, and the rum that we are going to be tasting, which is Tristo Vaz Teixeira. Apologize in advance for any of my mispronunciations. I'm trying my best. I think the most recognizable to rum enthusiasts might be the 970 line. You may have seen the bottles before. They kind of, it's like a
Yeah.
text heavy, very rum nerd level, but I think they do a good job in the presentation of it. To me, it looks nice. And they've released a bunch of various ages, a lot of Madeira cask aging, French oak aging. And I was kind of perusing some of the various brands. One that I wish that we could try, so the Branca brand, they actually did a what they call a Bruto da Coluna release, which is the
Hmm.
Portuguese version of Brut de Cologne, which fans of French rums will recognize. And it was a 79% ABV unaged rum.
Yeah.
So
Wait,
really
we
breaking out the
totally
bazooka for
glossed over
that.
something. You said the other O Reizinho is pot still,
Yes.
and this is some of it's column, some of it may be pot, but in the agricole GI for French islands, it's only column.
Right. Yeah. It's still type is not specified. That is a good callback. We should have pointed that out in the Madeira Rum GI. As far as I can tell, still type is not specified, which would make
Yeah.
sense because the O Reizinho rums that we just tried are pot still rums. Engenhos do Norte, which Engenhos, by the way, is the Portuguese word for mill, I believe. Like sugar factory mill is kind of what it
Hmm.
translates to. So
Engine.
they,
Yeah.
yeah, their primary stills that they use the most. They have 3 columns, each with 14 plates, but they also do have one smaller pot still, and they ferment about 36 hours for the fermentation. One rare thing about the distillery is that the mill still runs on steam, which from
Cool.
what I read
Interesting.
is very uncommon. So
Hmm.
yeah, and they I think they were one of the distilleries to really get in early on aging stuff, because aging in Madeira historically was not really a thing at all. And it's really only been in the last maybe 20 years or so. I believe the government started incentivizing producers to start aging more rum. And so more and more are setting aside more aged stocks. But that's why you'll see like some, high teen year releases from Engenhos do Norte under, the 970 brand, I believe. They
Hmm.
may be even like having some in the 20-year range at this point. So a wide range of stuff from this distillery. Quite the contrast to the Little King over at Orizeno.
It's interesting already. You can pick up a distinct kind of flavor profile from the nose, or like a commonality, I guess I would say, but
Mm,
also differences.
yes. This one for me, and so again, this is one of the unaged rums. It's the Tristo Vaz Teixeira Agricola da Madeira, 60% ABV. Do you know who Tristo Vaz Teixeira was, John?
I don't. I know tristão probably is the Portuguese version of being sad, right? Triste is sad,
Oh, I just
and
thought
in
it was the Portuguese version of Tristan.
I mean, well, that's where that name also shares the same root, but
Yeah,
I know
yeah,
the literal meaning is sad. And then
yeah.
I want to say teixeira is a type of plant or tree.
Oh,
Uh,
I was
I
not
think it's
aware
a
of that.
tree. I'm not 100% sure of that, but
Well, I
um,
more so meant, do you know who the human being was?
oh, I do not know who the human
So
being was, but I
he
have confidence you're going to tell me.
he was part of the group of explorers, Portuguese navigators who first kind of made their way to Madeira in the early 1400s. So yeah, I
Gotcha.
guess it's
Makes
an
sense. Yeah.
homage to him. But when I when I first noticed this, my brain went exactly where yours did earlier, which
Interesting.
was
Okay.
to Mexico.
Yeah.
Um, I wrote like nose spicy, charred peppers, smoke, fresh olives, um, which is a note that it particularly reminded me a little bit of Alambique Serrano and some of
Hmm.
their rums. I was just like, if you had blindfolded me and told me, asked me where this was, I would have been like, that's from Oaxaca, like definitely.
Yeah. I'm, but the only difference is now I'm getting a little bit of like something funky in here.
Hmm. I don't necessarily get funk. I definitely get savory. I get a lot of salinity in it as well. And a little bit of kind of like citrus
Yeah.
peel, like lime a little bit, but
Almost like fishy is too strong, but
mm,
something in that area.
maybe, well, I said salinity, like brine, sometimes
Yeah,
those
but I'm not talking
flavors,
about yeah, I get that,
those
but
for me kind of go towards seafood sometimes.
yeah, there's a little bit more seafoody something for me.
Yeah, again, tasting it, a lot of that carries over for me. A little more of the salinity comes in, but I still get those kind of like chilies, charred peppers, um, in there. But there is like an oceany quality to it as well.
And I'm also getting a little bit of baking spices as well,
Mm,
which I didn't get from the other one. So I don't know quite what it is, but hint of like cinnamon or cardamom or one of those. This is the first time I'm tasting it, so
yeah.
still trying to figure it out.
I can also say for a 60% rum, I think it's a pretty easy drinking experience
It
for me.
does. The nose hit me. It's not often. Sorry, it's tasting so. I'm getting so much flavor that I'm actually like salivating, which is a good sign. Um,
If you're on
the
YouTube, you can literally see the drool coming down John's chin right now.
that's not true for those of you listening to the podcast. Um, the nose hit me so strong. Yes, it's a 60% rum, but I don't very often stick my nose in a glass anymore and then have to pull out
Mm.
because your nose burns because I taste a lot of rums and I'm pretty practiced at it to avoid that from happening. But this one actually it did get me twice. So
Do you
it's
know
it's
do you know the mouth
pungent.
trick? Do you know the
Yeah,
mouth trick?
of course. I
Okay.
do that open mouth, right? For those of you who may not know the mouth trick, when you're nosing a glass, right, you keep your mouth open, you breathe in through your mouth and through your nose, your nostrils at the same time, which
I
allows you
actually
to avoid some of that.
I don't breathe through my nose at all. I just breathe in through the mouth. I'll go back and do ones where I breathe a little bit more through the nose, but when I'm
Okay.
first getting into something, I put the nose in and just breathe in through the
That's
mouth.
a good trick. I hadn't ever really done that before, but you like it's you can't not breathe through your nose when you're breathing
Yeah,
through your
it's
mouth,
still yeah,
right?
you still it
Yeah,
still comes in a little bit. Yeah. It's like
but
trying to
that's
keep
that's
your
pretty
eyes
cool.
open while you sneeze. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. This is another one I like.
Yeah, I like it
And
too.
I've had some experience with some Madeira rum that I haven't enjoyed as much.
Hmm.
And the last three I've enjoyed despite their oddness
Yeah.
or weirdness to
Quirkiness.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, the unaged stuff they've been doing for a long time in our conversations both with Richard and with Peter, they both mentioned, the age stuff can right now be a little hit or miss just because a lot of the producers are still learning how to manage aging programs, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole other skill set to develop over time.
It's a good
And
point.
I've seen that, even from a single distillery, I've had aged rums from O Reizinho that I was like, not for me, although other people enjoyed them. But this one that we tasted previously was right in my wheelhouse. Really,
Agreed.
really liked it. I do like this rum. The finish is a little bit
Yeah.
disappointing.
Agreed.
It does kind of like fade pretty quickly, but it's still a nice rum.
I agree with you there. I think you're spot on. I'll also double down on your note of chilies or
Mm,
peppers. I
yeah.
mean, it's probably the most that I can recall of any rum that I get this chili pepper thing. Quite prevalent.
It's funny that to me the rum that as most had that note is Alambique Serrano because Serrano is
Serrano
a
peppers.
is a pepper.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's subconscious at work, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's good and it reminds me of those Oaxacan rums a little bit. All right, let's keep things moving. Go to our next distillery, which is Vina Alta. This is
Yes.
the Call rum, which is one of the brands that they make at Vina Alta. Vina Alta is also a newer distillery. It's smaller as well, so this
Hmm.
might have made more sense to do after Orizeno. We're kind of ping ponging back and forth between small and big. But this was founded in 2019, so I think this is the newest distillery there. It was a husband and wife team, Maria and Paolo. I actually couldn't find their last name online, so I apologize for that. But they have two brands, Call rum and Shortridge Lawton rum.
Hmm.
And they actually, so this is one where you kind of see the still, and it's like, oh, this kind of looks like the type of it's like a craft distillery hybrid still. It's the kind of still you're used to seeing at newer distilleries in places all over the world, right? So it's a hybrid still. I think they're the only distillery on the island that does double distillation. And Secret Rum Bar, the blog, written by Stuart Pierce, he took a trip to Madeira in 2022 and did a great write up. He visited every distillery in person, did a write up of them. And as of late 2022, what Vina Alta was doing was they were having Engenhos do Norte crush their cane and do the first distillation on their pot still there. And then they would
Mm.
send the rum to Vina Alta to do the second distillation on their hybrid still. So I don't know
Hmm.
if they still have that setup going right now or not, or if they have their own way of kind of crushing on site now. But they've mostly released unaged rums. I know they've done at least one bottled, lightly aged rum, but they do have rum aging in a variety of casks right now. And I also know this is the rum your sample mysteriously disappeared. So I will be guiding us through this one solo.
For the record, it's the only sample that I think I've ever somehow misplaced or lost over the years. So very disappointing for me. But
This is a,
interested to
I
hear what you think.
I know I wish you could be tasting this with me to kind of sanity check some of my impressions I'm getting from it. It's a distinctive nose from the other ones. Initially, I thought it was kind of like closed off and narrow in what it was presenting, but I'm getting more from it now. I don't know if it's because it's had more of a chance to open up. This is
Mm-hmm.
a 59.3% unaged rum,
Okay.
and you get some of those olivey rubbery qualities, but also like kind of singing through it is a little bit of like funky tropical fruit that almost reminds me of Jamaica a little bit. It's kind of like overripe pineapple slightly, but it's faint in there. It's not dominating. I don't think I would mistake this for a Jamaican rum or anything like that, but it just has this nice kind of presence coming through the middle of it,
Okay.
on the nose. So I'm gonna dive in.
And as you're doing that, I'll ask you, does it feel like it's part of the same series to you, like we had mentioned about the other two distilleries, or is it different enough?
I see some commonalities.
Okay. All
Um,
right. I
but
mean,
it is a
given what we learned about all of the Madeira GI stuff, you would imagine that they're going to. Yeah.
well, and especially, given that the initial distillation was at one of the other distilleries, although
That makes sense
that
also.
initial
Yeah.
distillation was on their pot still, and the rum that we tried from Engenho Norte was from their column still. Um, this one is much tamer in terms of
Hmm.
overall flavor profile. It's the closest to sort of more neutral characteristics. That's not to say there's
Okay.
nothing going on,
Well,
but
it's
it's
double
just
distilled. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that has something to do with it, but you get a little bit of the characteristics on the nose, but you also just kind of get like a little bit of sweetness, savoriness. I don't really get hit with like super specific, oh, that tastes like that, you know?
Yeah. So Vina Alta, I'm very much presuming that means like high vines.
High vine.
Although,
Yeah, that's what I was
yeah.
thinking. Yeah, I mean the notes I mentioned on the nose come through on the palate. The finish is just very dry and very quick, and you're not left with a whole lot to grab onto. So it's something that I could see blending in really well to lots of different cocktails. I don't know
Hmm.
if that was the intent behind it, maybe to be a great, kind of overproof poncha rum or something like that. But I could see it being very versatile and unoffensive and stuff like that. I think that would probably be the best application of this rather than something to sip neat. Um,
Yeah.
but there's no flaws or anything like that. It's just
Hmm.
not quite as much power, not quite as much distinctive flavor, not quite as much complexity as the other rums that we've tried so far.
It may be a hard act to follow, right? I
Yeah,
mean, if you had started with this one, maybe we would have kind of
that
had a
could be.
different journey. Yeah.
That could be. But again, this is also a relatively new distiller, and they have other rums out there. They may have some other ones that are show a bit more of a wild side. I don't know. All right, we got a couple more to do before we wrap this up. So next on the list, John,
Okay.
Engenho Novo.
The new mill or engine or factory.
New in some ways, but old in others. So this
Ah.
was refounded, I guess you could say, in 2006, but it was originally started by a guy named William Hinton in 1845 and became one of the biggest distilleries on the island, with its production peaking in the 1920s. Ended up closing in 1986, but it was brought back to life in 2000. I don't know if it's like the original
Mm.
building or anything, but it's like the
Right back.
name and the brand and everything
It's
was
alive.
it's alive.
Alive.
In 2006 by some of the heirs of William Hinton,
Hmm.
and are
Who sounds
he,
decidedly not Portuguese, by the way.
I don't
William
know what
Hinton
the I
sounds
don't
like a very British name, I would
yeah,
say.
perhaps William Hinton came from the UK.
Yeah.
Um, but that name will sound familiar, I think, to a lot of listeners, because as we mentioned earlier, that is the one Madeira rum brand that, as of right now, is distributed in the United States. I know I'd come across these rums. They have a 69% ABV unaged rum that I've tasted. They also have, I think, a 40 ABV 6 year. They've done a number of single cask releases as well at the 6 year age mark. They've done one in ex Madeira, ex brandy, ex whiskey, and some other fortified wine casks. They also do have an unaged 40% version, which I happen to still have a sample of
Hmm.
and am
And you
nosing
mentioned
now.
you mentioned the 69% unaged, which I happen to have a sample
I
of
know. Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now.
And I've tried that one in the past.
Yeah.
And I do remember a few things kind of distinctly about them, but I'm curious to get your take on that. But
Okay.
this is another one. They distill on a single column, 8 plates. It's quite an old still. It predates 1969 at the very least because it was restored in 1969 for the first
Hmm.
time, and then it was restored again in 2007. So it must be quite an old still. They do a controlled fermentation around 24 hours. And this is the distillery, by the way. I think I might have said Engenho do Norte earlier. It's Engenho Novo that uses the two cane varieties, POJ 2725 and
Gotcha.
NCO 310. So they use a combo of
Gotcha.
those. I
The
think they said that those are the
galaxy
two
names.
like
Yeah.
most resistant to disease or something like that. But
Yeah.
yes, they do sound like galaxy names as well.
It reminds me of that. Do you know that story about the WoW galaxy? It was like this story of, I think it was Puerto Rico, where they got the signal and they thought it was aliens talking to them, like SETI. Do you
No,
know
I don't.
SETI?
I don't.
You don't
Yeah, I
know?
know SETI. I know SETI. I
Okay.
don't know this story. Yeah.
Oh, really? So there was like I don't remember what year it was, like the 70s or something like that, where somebody was sitting there and they're looking at this printout of these signals and they see something on there that is very clearly not what they were expecting. And there's like a
Mm,
big red ink circle and the word wow, exclamation point, exclamation point. And that became like a famous thing by like extraterrestrial
wow.
phenomenon people that are like, this proves, like, the guy with the big hair,
Yeah, yeah.
aliens. That's what it reminds me of. I can't remember what the galaxy name was that they said that signal was from or whatever it was, but I do remember that
Interesting.
story. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Ever since I read the three body problem, my official philosophy is
Mm.
do not, under any circumstances, try to communicate with extraterrestrial life.
It is a good conservative lesson to learn from that. that.
Okay, so tell me about what you're tasting in the 69% ABV William Hinton.
Yeah. So first thing I would say is, especially in comparison in this flight, this nose is underwhelming. At
Interesting.
69%, it's not jumping out of the glass in the same way as the others, and I would have expected. It's kind of thin, it's kind of one dimensional.
I will say I'm getting a similar experience with the 40%. My recollection of the 69% was, uh, and I know you say that I go to notes like this a lot, but
Hmm.
it had this gravelly note to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
This
it
is your
tastes
fantastic,
it
by the way. It's your tasting note of anything that is on the floor or
the
a
ground.
pavement or the ground level. Yes.
It
You've got
had it
you
was
must have
like
just like as a kid licked the ground in all different places because this is where you all pull all of this
I
from.
don't know. I'm breaking out the Lucinda Williams car wheels on a gravel road right now. That's what I'm hearing. It's just this like gravelly earthiness, and you get some of the kind of characteristic cane juice notes and
Hmm.
things. I mean, there's some brininess, some oliviness to it, some grassiness, but that gravel was what really overtook the 69% to me, upon my recollection of it. The 40% is much tamer and almost closer, kind of like the last rum, but a 40% version, where this is something I think you could throw in any drink and it's not gonna get in the way or anything like that.
Now that I've properly made fun of you for it, I will say that I do hear what you're saying about the gravelly kind of like. Do you know when you get a new shipment of gravel, like you're gonna do your yard and you put in like these rocks or something, and you
It's nothing
dump
like a
the
new shipment
load,
of gravel. Yeah.
you dump the load, and then all of the little like dust comes from that, like, and if you
It's the
breathe that
dust.
in,
Yes.
that's what this smells like. So I'm with you in that.
They do, as I mentioned, like as of late 2022, they had at least 1,000 casks aging there. So they're doing, quite a bit of putting rum away for aging. It'd be great if we had some aged William Hinton run to taste through. Unfortunately, we do not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely. I would be curious to see kind of how it holds up to aging. I would imagine that the aged rums would be quite cask driven, just because again, the flavor profile of this rum is it's not super strong, at least at 40%. I do remember the 69% being quite stronger, but again, having a lot of that gravel note that I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm tasting it now, and I will back that up. I will say it's, again, like the nose, fairly one-dimensional. It's nothing is wrong with it. It tastes okay. It's got a little sweetness there behind it in a
Mm,
nice way. And for 69%, it doesn't overpower you.
yeah.
It drinks well, but there's not a whole lot that it's doing for me, including you get some finish once you take in a few sips, and it's kind of coming back up now. The little bit of the warmth in the chest,
Yeah.
but you would expect that from something that's 69%. I'm just not getting enough in my mouth to back that up. So I'm getting the alcohol, I'm not getting enough flavor ride from it.
Well, and remember,
Um,
this is controlled fermentation, 24 hours. So,
it's
yeah.
exactly what I would expect from that. It's sort of meh.
Mm.
Not sure I love this.
Yeah, I'm not tasting the same rum, but I wasn't overly enthused with it when I did try it. I remember that. I've heard, others praise that rum, so I certainly don't take that as the end all be all.
Yeah.
But compared to some of the other ones on here, I tend to gravitate a little bit more, I think, to the Engenhos Norte and the O Reizinho, kind of, to me, are the top tier of what we tried. The Vinha Alta, I'm really intrigued to follow them and kind of see what's going next. And I would like to explore the aged offerings from William Hinton as well. There is at least one more place we need to talk about before we wrap up, which is
Hmm.
the place that makes what I believe is, I haven't seen sales figures or anything, but I believe it's the best selling rum on the island, and that is Engenhos da Calheta, located in Calheta. That's where the name comes from. Founded in 1901. They make what is basically kind of the ubiquitous unaged rum that you can find anywhere on the island, that many people use for their ponchas, basically. So very cheap. I know I've seen Fat Rum Pirate did a review of this in 2020. He bought a bottle for 11 euros. So this is
Okay.
like, it's I think it's very easy to find. The
Yeah.
label is it
Ubiquitous.
yeah,
Hmm.
ubiquitous. The label is very, very basic. If you look at it, it's just this like red and yellow label. It says aguardiente de cana. By the way, I should mention another thing in the GI. They have certain terminology that is allowed that they call traditional mentions. So
Mm.
these are compatible with either the natural or the aged category. You can use aguardiente de caña, which means cane spirit. That's the translation that they give. You can also use aguardiente de cana de azúcar, so sugar cane spirit, or aguardiente de caña sacarina, saccharin cane
Hmm.
spirit.
Hmm.
So if you see those on any Madeira rum bottles, don't be like, oh, is this not rum? Is this different? It's still rum. It's just kind of like traditional terminology, much like we see aguardiente on a lot of those Mexican
Yeah.
rums as well.
Exactly. Right.
Um, so I believe this is column distilled. The brands they have Calheta rum. They also have one called Bracana as well that I think is not quite as ubiquitous. And I thought Fat Rum Pirate said some interesting things about this rum. He gave it quite a glowing review. He gave it four
Hmm.
stars, thought it was really interesting, especially for the 11 euro price. He said, I dare say if Luca Gargano bottled this, many rum snobs would be falling over themselves to try it and then raving about it. As it stands, though, I'm probably going to be pretty much the only reviewer that ever reviews this. He also added, let's be fair, it looks pretty shit. If it was going to be made available outside the island, they would have to update the presentation. So, it's very basic. I'm sure like on the island it's probably become kind of a classic look. It's almost like Ray and Nephew adjacent, sort of, in its presentation. But
Yeah.
again, with red and yellow instead of the yellow and green. It's not going to win any design awards, but I can see it having that look where like everyone knows it. No one wants it to change there, probably.
Right.
And
Right.
actually, Peter Holland shared with us kind of his journey, his evolution of opinion about this rum, which will actually splice into the show right now.
But that idea of like now, like that first rum that I didn't like, the Cleated Distillery, the white, the ubiquitous kind of red and yellow kind of label that you see at all the tourist places, you know, now I really appreciate it. It is a bit dirty, it is a bit rough and around the edges, and it's a bit invariable. And you know what? Actually, I really like it because it's got character. And it kind of sums up everything, is there. And it's not to say the other rums are bad, but I can appreciate the qualities of this.
Okay, so those are his thoughts on it. It's something that he's grown to love. The day that I go to Madeira, because I think it's going to happen at some point, this is the first rum that I want to grab and try, just because
Hmm.
I know it's going to be within arm's reach in most places that you
Right.
go. And it's, again, that one that's really kind of part of the fabric of the culture, it seems like. So yeah, got to throw this in a poncha and give it a try.
Yeah, to your point, I think, I wonder about how different it is than some of the aguardientes that we have, here in Miami from South America.
Right.
Obviously, it's going to have its own characteristics,
Hmm.
but, I wouldn't be surprised if it tasted similarly to some of that.
Right. Some of those really cheap
Right.
cane juice rums from various Latin American
Exactly.
countries work their way
Hmm.
up into your market there. I know you've tried a few of them and been pleasantly surprised by some of
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're actually good.
Yeah.
Many of them. So,
Yeah.
but I wonder how different it would be from them, is kind of where I'm going with it. I have to say the label, I'm not terrible. I'm not mad at it. It's it's
It,
it's sort of utilitarian.
I was literally about to say
Oh,
utilitarian.
okay.
It almost
Okay.
like it looks like government issued rum is kind of what it looks like.
This is the label that they would use in a movie, right? As
Right.
a
Yeah.
prop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it looks like. But again, that's why I think it speaks to kind of it's probably an institution there. So yeah, I would say don't change it. I don't know. If you ever do want to export, maybe you've got to update it or something. But I don't know.
Mm,
Ray and Nephew's gone a long way exporting with the same label. So let's not put
yeah.
any limits on it. We're right here at the end. There's one more, everywhere I read about Madeira rum, everyone I talk to, everyone refers to 5 distilleries in Madeira, which I think we've covered. However, when you go to there's an official website for rum of Madeira, which we'll link to, and they list 6, the sixth of which is Abel Fernandez, LDA. And they say that this is a producer, it's located in the north, and that they've been producing rum since 1982. It says
Hmm.
it's the smallest distillery in Madeira, and their main product is aged Madeira rum. So, according to the website, it says they have dozens of barrels, more than 600 liters capacity acquired from Madeira wine companies in its warehouse with rums aging for 15, 18, 21, and 24 years. So, I'm unclear, and I wasn't able to find definitively, which I apologize. But these guides aren't meant to be the end all be all, definitive resource. It's really just us kind of learning as much as we can and tasting some of these rums and processing them with you. Um, I don't know if they're sourcing rum from other distilleries and just aging it, which is,
Hmm.
common practice. There's other
Yeah.
brands throughout the world that do that. Or I don't know if they actually are distilling. It would just be kind of surprising for someone to distill rum and only age it and not, sell any of the unaged, especially since how long aged it is. But at the very least, this is another brand to be aware of. And we unfortunately don't have any to try, but just want to put it on people's radar because I basically never see it discussed. And could find very little information about their rums.
It's like in basketball, the sixth man. This is like the sixth distillery.
This is yeah.
And I just realized looking at the numbers here of some of the age products that they may have 15, 18, 21, 24 years, that earlier in the episode I said 28 years, which is not a multiple of 3. So damn it.
Egg on
I
your
blame
face.
I blame the rum.
All right. Well, we're gonna go over to our interview now with Kyle, Rumcast listener Kyle from the DC Rum Rebels. Gave us some great additional color about Madeira, some more information about O Reizinho, and also the awaited reveal of the Madeira Mystery sample. So John and I share our thoughts. We try to stumble toward a guess, and Kyle reveals that to us. So we will cut over to that now. All right, we are here joined by Kyle Pulford of the DC Rum Rebels. I was going to say Rum Revels. I feel like y'all do a lot of reveling with rum, but you're the Rum
They have
Rebels.
revelry.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We
before we started recording, we were just talking about the legendary bottle share nights that y'all have. I know we see pictures of those in the Rumcast patrons Discord, and it always seems like an amazing time. You always have rums from all over the place. You have octopus shaped rum cakes made with DOK that have henceforth been known as the Doctopus cakes. Anyway, you are a couple months or so removed from visiting Madeira. You shared the lovely samples of Madeira rum that John and I mentioned during this episode. So we just wanted to have you on to talk about your experience, traveling to Madeira from the States. We know it's not a location that I think a lot of Americans typically have on their radar to visit. It's pretty far away, pretty remote, pretty small island. So just to get your experience there, I know you visited a distillery while you were there, brought some rums back, and then also in the cache of samples that you passed along to us, there was this sample which just on the label, which I'm showing now, if anyone's watching on YouTube, just says Madeira Mystery with not one, but 3 question marks,
Triple
which
question
is
mark.
kind of the reaction I had while I was tasting it. I think was three question marks. But anyway, sorry, that was like the longest intro ever. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Well, thank you for having me. I definitely really appreciate it. This has been something I've thought about for a while. I'm like, oh man, finally get to be on the Rumcast. So very excited.
It's like a rite of passage for every rum lover now.
Right,
This,
exactly.
this is how easy it is. All you have to do is bribe us with some samples, and we'll have you right on the show. Okay, so Madeira. First of all, how did you end up going to Madeira? Was it like in my head? I know you love rum. Were you just kind of like, this seems like a cool place, but also I know they've got some really interesting rum, so that's why I'm going to go. What was the genesis of that?
Did you throw a dart at a map?
Yeah.
Because that would have been impressive if you hit
I was gonna say
Madeira.
that would be very
Yeah.
impressive.
Yeah.
Like it was definitely, rum had a lot to do with it. Over the last few years, we've heard more and more about rums from Madeira and the excitement, and John and Lori releasing their Madeiran rum here. So it was definitely in the back of my mind for a while as a place I'd like to visit at some point. But it's also like my wife and I like to travel. And so I'd seen Madeira on multiple travel blogs and things like that. And it honestly just looked like a beautiful place. That's kind of, like I said, a little bit of a mix of both. We actually originally weren't planning on traveling out of the country this year. It kind of just happened to work out that way. We were actually planning on just taking like a long weekend trip to Shenandoah, which is, just not too far west of here.
How did you get from that to going to Madeira?
Well,
did you win the lottery, like a scratch off tickets? What happened there?
No. Funny story was because we have a 2-year-old, and so we were not gonna
frequent guest on the Rumcast Patreon happy hours.
Right.
Yes.
So we were gonna like I said, take a long weekend trip, kind of take her with us. But then my sister-in-law, who has a dog, she's like, hey, like if you take care of because they were heading out of the country too, like if you take care of our dog for this amount of time, like we'll take care of Addie for like a week and a half. And we're like, oh, okay. All right. So that kind of
it's a pretty good trade in your favor, I feel like.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So that was like, all right. So maybe we should be looking at, going somewhere a little bit more than Shenandoah. And we had heard, over the pandemic, I don't know if you guys experienced this, but I feel like everybody I knew traveled to Portugal over the course of the pandemic. And so so we were like, hey, let's, we knew we were going to go to Lisbon and spend some time in Lisbon. So then it kind of came down to, well, we can kind of go up north, go to Porto, go to the Douro Valley, or go to Madeira. And so I kind of, was subtly hinting towards Madeira and like, oh, look at how beautiful, because my wife and I both love Hawaii, and Madeira is known as, the Hawaii of Europe.
Hawaii of Europe, yeah.
So it didn't take too much prompting to be like, hey, look, let's do Lisbon and Madeira. And so that's kind of how it played out.
At some point, did she realize that Madeira is also a rum destination and was kind of like, wait a second, I see what's going on here. Like, you told me about like the Hawaii of Europe, all the beautiful
by the way,
landscapes.
There's this rum distillery I'm going to head out to today. You can join me if you want, but
No, I think she pretty much knew. I'm pretty sure she knew like immediately, because I had mentioned Madeira rum before and things like that. And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, within the early stages, there was an understanding that there was going to be some rum involved in this trip. So
okay, so talk us through what rum was involved. I know you told us before you were able to visit one distillery. I don't know which one it was, but yeah, take us through that process, how you picked, which one you ended up going to and what that was like.
Yeah, so actually it's just by happenstance that John and Lori from Raising Glasses, they were like, hey, like, because we bottled this from O Reizinho?
O Reizinho? Yeah,
O Reizinho.
Really hard to say, yeah.
Somewhere in there.
And they're like, hey, we know Pedro there, like we'll give you his contact information if you want to visit, don't hesitate to reach out. He doesn't do formal distillery tours, so I just sent him an email and was like, hey, I'm going to be here these days. Are there any days that work best for you for me to stop by? And we just, communicated throughout the whole time, and managed to find a day that worked best for us and got to visit. and it's I mean, it's a cool little distillery. I mean, it's definitely not what you would not what you would expect. You see some of the larger like agricole distilleries in the Caribbean, they're big, operations. Pedro's like literally doing this out of his house.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so it's awesome. He's got a still there. He's got his barrels aging in a part of his like garage area. Yeah, just really cool. And just sat with him for like an hour. We just like sat in his garage and we just chatted about
That's
rum, and he
awesome.
showed me, yeah, some of the other things he was doing. He's actually taking like Madeiran grown corn and making 100% corn whiskey as well.
Wow. The
So
Madeira
yeah, so I
mellow
got to,
corn.
yeah, exactly. I was like, age it up and you'll compete with Heaven Hill,
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it was really cool just chatting with him. We shared some stories. We actually, on an unrelated note, have some like similar health issues and things. So it's just like, we
Oh,
just
wow.
bonded, and it was pretty cool to chat with him about rum and everything Madeira.
That's
Yeah.
great. You know it's a good conversation when you can pull off like the like Jaws like scar scene, Like we're like, yeah, look at this. Yeah,
Right,
you got
right,
that too? Yeah, you're in. Yeah.
for sure.
So,
How much rum did you guys pour while you're talking? Sorry, Will. I didn't,
no, go ahead.
yeah.
It was a lot. He brought me through his whole
I
lineup.
imagine.
We had
Yeah.
a couple of the unaged ones, and then like I said, the corn whiskey, and then the 3-year-old, and then the 6-year-old, and then yeah, it was a good time.
Also fits with the Jaws scene. You see, all you needed was a
Right.
shark and you're there.
Exactly.
So, other than visiting O Reizinho,
Mhm.
I'm really jealous that you got to go there, just because everything I've read and heard from people who have been there just seems so cool. Like I always hear exactly like you said, it's a small space. Just drinking rum in someone's garage who makes it there sounds awesome to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, what were there any other rum adjacent or rum experiences you had there? I know obviously it seems like you brought back bottles from several distilleries. So were you just kind of shopping around? How is the rum buying experience while you're there?
Yeah, so definitely had a couple. There's a bar in downtown Funchal called Madeira Rum House,
Okay.
which serves, they pretty much have all of the bottles that Madeira has produced, basically.
Hmm.
So a lot of opportunity to try things there. You can get a really authentic poncha there, which I don't know if y'all are familiar with
I was
poncha,
gonna
but it's
ask
like
about the poncha. Yeah, did you have
yeah.
some good ponchas?
Oh yeah, it was wonderful. Very, very good. So yeah, like had some authentic poncha. And then in terms of buying, I mean, they at least from my experience in the areas we were, like they didn't really have liquor stores. I mean, they just sell liquor in their corner stores basically.
Oh,
So
nice.
every
Cool.
time we were kind of walking down the street, I'd pop my head in one and see, what kind of bottles they had, what the prices were, that kind of stuff. And I was looking specifically for a couple things. Like I had tried this, like I said, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the Portuguese pronunciation of this, but the Tristão Vaz Teixeira. Oh crud, it's gonna blur. Oh.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, no, that's one of the samples you sent us, right?
yeah,
And that's
because I
from
had actually tried
Engenhos do
that.
Norte, is it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. I had actually tried that. Meredith, up in Rochester, she had sent me a sample of that before, and I was like, "Whoa, this is so good!" So I had my eyes out for that rum in particular,
Yeah.
but then just trying to pick up other things from some of the other distilleries. So yeah, it was a pretty seamless experience. Like I said, just walked into a store, see what they have. It was cheap. I mean, this bottle of the 700 milliliter of the Tristal Vaz Teixeira, I think was 22 €.
Nice.
Um,
Wow. Yeah, I
yeah,
was
Yeah.
gonna ask about prices.
Same. Yeah.
yeah. So,
And availability wise, was there a lot of variance from store to store? Is that why you kind of kept poking in, or is it?
yeah, it was mostly the same stuff. In fact, this bottle out of all the ones, the Teixeira was actually the hardest one to find. I
Mm,
had to poke my head in a few stores until I found it, because they had the lower proof one and the aged one, but they didn't have the kind of pinkish label 60% one. So I had to
Gotcha.
poke my head in a couple stores before I found that particular bottle. But for the most part, they pretty much all have the same thing. There only being 4 distilleries. They pretty much have the same stuff. And then liquor wise, they have kind of the same generic American, Jack Daniels, Wild Turkey,
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. And then, I mean, on another note, I know we're talking rum, they have a huge selection of Madeira wine,
Wine.
which
oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was a eye-opening experience for me. I absolutely loved Madeira wine. So now I'm on the lookout for more of that here in the States.
Yeah.
What on that same note, was there rum there aged in Madeira casks very often?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
would figure.
yeah, I think most of it is aged, at least at O Reizinho. He
Yeah.
ages pretty much all his stuff in Madeira casks. So yeah, I think a lot of it is Madeira age. Like I said, I didn't get a chance to go to the other three, so I mean I'm sure they have some type of a mix. I would think I'm sure they get some ex bourbon, but
Mhm.
honestly that would just be a guess on my part. But yeah, I know particularly for O Reizinho, they definitely age a lot in the Madeira casks.
Okay. I guess we need to talk about the mystery sample, right?
Dive
So
into it. I was checking to see if I had any left, and unfortunately, I don't have any left. I was gonna drink it along with you all, but I have a pretty distinct memory of what it smelled and tasted like. So
I guess that means you liked it.
I did, I did.
So, John, what were your initial impressions of the Madeira mystery sample with 3 question marks?
Well, so the first thing is I'm like, it's not familiar is the words I would use to start with. Like I don't have any kind of reference point in rum, nothing that I can point to that I'm like, oh, this is like kind of in this direction, you know? It's just way different out there. I mean, it's so just to give people a hint that are listening. It says this is a clear, unaged, I assume, spirit,
Yeah.
and it smells fresh, you know, so something that's being distilled fresh, most likely. But I'm I don't know much other than that. I'm having trouble. It's sweet. It's got a sweet nose, right? Almost peachy.
I was okay. Peach was one of the things that
Yeah,
I wrote down. You said this didn't remind you of anything, and I, we should clarify this sample bottle did not say Madeira Mystery Rum on it.
right.
However, I think I went into it assuming it was a rum. Like I didn't have any preconceived notions of like, oh, he might be trying to throw in some other Madeira spirit in there. And so I was really going into it with a rum mindset. And my initial thought was, well, this doesn't read like a cane juice rum to me. It went more towards like it actually there's a rum it reminded me of, which
Really?
was Isla rum, actually, a little bit.
Mm.
Because I get this kind of like fennelly sort of
Okay.
note to it.
I
Which
was going there too, but
yeah.
it's I'm slightly leaning a little bit more nutty than fennelly.
I could see a little nuttiness. There's definitely like it's sweet, but it's also it has some very savory elements to it as well.
Mm.
But it I was like, if this is rum, I think it's one of those molasses rums that they've done some kind of like weird native bacteria fermentation kind of stuff
Right.
with. That's kind of the only thing it reminded me of.
I'll say
Um,
one other thing is that if it was a rum, I was thinking maybe something like evaporated cane juice, cane syrup type of thing, because
mm,
I know that those get weird for me. And every time I have one of them, I'm always kind of like, what is this? And it takes me a little bit. So that's the only thing. And I'm not necessarily saying I think it is that, but that
yeah.
was a thought that occurred to me.
It definitely occurred to me that like if this is a rum, I don't think it's a fresh cane juice rum like all the other Madeira rums that we tried.
It's hard
And
to
like you
find
said,
cane in it. Yeah.
yeah. There's not a lot of like fresh cane character to me. So I was like maybe someone tried making a weird molasses rum or yeah, I think like cane syrup is an interesting thing. But on the palate, like I get like I get that peach gummy kind of thing
Yep.
and like a cantaloupe on the finish, but there's also these like savory elements. There's like a little bit of bell pepper, like, and I
Yep.
get this sort of wet pavement note out of like a
You
little bit
love
out of
wet
left field.
pavement, Will.
I
You,
know I
you
love
just
Wet
wet
love wet
pavement.
pavement.
pavement, wet
Wet
Um,
forest
pavement.
floor, anything on the ground.
so yeah, that's where I am. And if it were a rum, I would guess it's some sort of weird molasses, weird fermentation rum. But I'm also completely open to the possibility that this is some sort of fruit eau de vie kind of
Right.
situation or something like that. Especially since Kyle, you have a history of giving me
Liking.
fruit eau de
Mm-hmm.
vies
Mm-hmm.
from unexpected places. So
What do you think in
uh
terms of ABV?
I don't think it's high. I think it's
Same.
I think it's somewhere in the 40s.
I was
Um,
gonna go 40 to 43 type of
yeah,
thing.
I
Yeah.
could see like 45 maybe, but um, I don't think it's necessarily lacking in flavor at the
No,
proof. It's pretty easy to drink.
it's easy to
Um,
drink. Yep.
yeah. I don't,
I
Kyle, do
like
you
the
have any?
palate. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I like the palate better than the nose. The nose confuses me.
Hmm.
Like I'm just kind of confused by it. But the palate, I start drinking it, I'm like, this is really good. Whatever it is, it's really good. And then it kind of comes together for me in that order.
Yeah, I was trying to see exactly what the because I'm pretty sure you all nailed it on the or John nailed it on the proof point. But yeah, I actually I meant to ask you all. So now that you've had a chance to taste it and smell it and everything, I mean, what would you like? Like, do you enjoy it? Do you or is it not your thing? Like, what are your overall thoughts?
I think it's nice. I don't necessarily know that I would like jump to buy more of it, but I think it's it's so tough because I don't know. I can't figure out like what it is. It's certainly not like a lot of other things that I've had. Yeah, I don't know that I would seek it out, but I do think it's quality and good and interesting. Um, yeah, I don't, what do you think, John?
I'm gonna take a leap and say that it's not a rum, and that in that way, I still gravitate and prefer rum. No surprise there, right? Um,
Right.
But that said, I'm enjoying this. I think it's a very light profile. I think it's easily drank and enjoyed and kind of relaxing almost
Mm.
is what I would say. So from that standpoint, I think it could be really successful, and people for just kind of, an aperitivo almost, like just
Mm.
relax and chill with it. And that's it. Am I like you running out to go find this as soon as he tells us what it is? No, probably not. But am I appreciative of the style and or I should say the craft?
Hmm.
Yes.
I get kind of like a banana runt sort of flavor. It's not like a Worthy Park.
It's yeah, it's
It's
in
not
that
like a
hard
Worthy Park
candy
banana, but
thing. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
don't it's one of a kind.
To echo off of both of you, I think yeah, I quite enjoy it as just like it's an easy sipper. You know, you can
Hmm.
pour it in a glass, sit back with it, not think too much about it, and just enjoy it. Are you ready for the reveal?
Ready.
I'm ready. I'm buckled in.
It's Lionel Richie. It's easy.
Because
It's easy
y'all pretty
like
much got
Sunday
there.
morning.
Yeah, it is a banana eau de vie,
Mm,
distilled
No
from
is it
way.
bananas,
really? Awesome.
grown on Madeira. Yep.
Wait,
Nice.
Yeah.
where did it come from?
So it is actually from the Vinha Alta, which is actually one of the other samples I sent you was their agricole. But yeah, they also
Yeah.
distill a banana eau de vie. And my understanding, like I said, I wish I still had the bottle. But my understanding was that they take like overripe bananas that would otherwise be tossed, and
That makes
they
sense.
they ferment them and distill them. And yeah, when I nosed it, I got kind of that like very kind of like overly ripe banana, like kind of bordering on the edge where most of the peel is black, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see
So
that more now knowing what it is.
but yeah, it was such a unique thing. I was like, I just have to grab this. I just because it was I didn't even get to try it before I bought it. I was like, I've just never had a banana eau de vie before, so
Yeah.
it was just something I had to grab.
I think
It's so crazy. I finished the glass. There's like I guess a little trickle left in there. But now knowing what it is when I go back to it and smell it, I'm like, this smells exactly like overripe bananas. Like it's striking me in a way that it did like I could maybe get a hint of it before when I didn't know what
Right.
it was, but now that I know what
yeah.
it is, it's like my brain just pulls out the banana scent file and
Mm.
matches it.
I think
Crazy.
we may have an association or an over-indexing, you might say, of Worthy Park with that
Mhm.
overripe banana,
Or just
and
Jamaican rum in general
or just
too.
Jamaican,
Yeah.
right? I usually get it more from Worthy Park, but
Yeah,
I
for
see what you
sure.
mean.
They're the
But
banana
because
kings.
yeah, it doesn't match that, so I
Yeah.
couldn't get my brain to see it that way before you tell me what it was. Right? It's that weird thing.
Yeah. I
It's good.
also I fear that maybe the banana note I picked up on was subconsciously incepted into my mind because there's an article which we referenced in the episode, a series of articles on secretrumbar.com from Stuart Pierce's trip to Madeira back in 2022. Very comprehensive. He took visits to each distillery, and I just pulled it up again because as soon as you said banana eau de vie, I was like, I feel like I've heard about this. And he
Oh,
indeed has a little mention of Vinha Alta having a banana
okay.
eau de vie, which
There
he
you go.
described as a brilliant, innovative, and frankly delicious eau de vie produced using just the rejected bananas from the island that would otherwise go to waste. So yeah, so I don't know, maybe that was in my subconscious somewhere, but yeah,
I love the sustainability factor of that, right?
yeah,
Mhm.
You know, in terms of like saying, hey, these are going to get thrown out. And I guess you could use them for, filler or whatever. Like, what's the word I'm thinking of? For plants.
compost.
Compost?
Thank you. Compost.
Yeah.
But to be able to make a product out of it that is actually quite good is really
Mhm.
cool. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And like I said, you all nailed the proof point of it was I believe 42.7.
Oh,
So
right
I
there.
think John said 40 to 43. So
Yeah.
yeah, you all nailed it. I believe they also make a tangerine brandy or something like that, if I remember
Oh, that would be
correctly.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I might be misremembering that, but I feel like there was another fruit brandy that they make. But I'd hit the limit in my suitcase, so
The
there
suitcase
was
limit.
there was
Yep.
no adding anything else, unfortunately.
At
I
least you
wonder if,
brought a suitcase. You know, John's
yeah,
always going
I,
over to places and not
that's true.
not even checking a bag,
I
so he can't
travel
bring any
light.
home.
Oh,
Seriously.
I definitely came prepared. I brought the inflatable wine bottle shippers.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
gotta have them.
I was
You
ready
got to
to go.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder is there a bottle that you would start like throwing out your clothes for to like make room?
I don't. No. Well, I mean, who knows? I feel
I
like at
You
think
this
there
haven't
point,
had
is
it
I
one.
have
yet.
to go
There's one
back.
Yeah.
for each of us, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
You
for
don't know it
sure, for
until you
sure.
see it, but it's
That's
out
right.
there. Kyle, before we let you go, any final thoughts on Madeira? If anyone listening is, after listening to this episode, is thinking, gee, I really need to get myself to Madeira, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, a couple things for sure. I'd say, if you can, because Madeira is such it's there's a lot to explore there. Like you have the main city of Funchal, but there's a lot of hiking and things to do around. So I'd say if you want to get around the island, definitely rent a car. And if you're going to rent a car, rent well in advance because especially if you can't drive a manual transmission, because a lot of the
Mm.
automatic transmission cars get rented first. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'd rent well in advance. And just, I mean, try to do it as far in advance as you can as well, just because the prices are crazy.
Mm.
It ended up being like we ended up not renting a car because I think total for a few days it was like 400 to 500 euros for just like a few days of renting a car,
Mm.
and we
It
just
really is the
determined that
Hawaii
that
of
was
Europe.
yeah for real. Um, but yeah, so I'd say definitely do that. The other thing I would say is we went through Paris to get to Portugal to get to Lisbon first, and then flew from the flights from Lisbon to Madeira are easy. They're hour and a
Yeah.
half one-way flights each way. But I'd say if you're gonna go to Lisbon as well, don't go through Paris because that was uh that airport was a cluster trying to connect through there. So I'd say do your best to avoid connecting through Paris.
Try to get
Um,
Mm.
direct.
but other than that, like, get out. The food is delicious. I mean, both Lisbon and Madeira, you get all the fresh local seafood.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And then, yeah, I mean, I would encourage folks to get out and go visit a couple of the Madeira wine houses. Because there's so much, like I said, I knew nothing about Madeira other than a couple of the Foursquare bottles had been aged in Madeira cask and
Right.
things like
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I really
Cristiano
liked.
Ronaldo's from there. Like that's the
Right,
extent of
right.
your Madeira
I didn't
knowledge.
even know that. Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. Oh yeah, there's a big like Cristiano Ronaldo museum there and everything.
Ah,
Oh wow. Okay.
is that where
Um,
the bronze statue,
yeah.
the weird looking one is?
Is it really
I
there?
don't. No. I don't know if it's the weird one, but there is a
Okay.
statue out front. No, I don't know where that weird one is, but the slightly like
It's at the
tilted
bottom of the
face.
ocean
Yeah.
somewhere. It's in the Mariana Trench by now, is my guess.
John,
Right.
as our Miami correspondent, did the new
Yeah.
Dwayne Wade
Oh
statue
my God.
unseat the Cristian Ronaldo statue as worst rendering?
I want to go see it in person. I haven't seen it in person yet. I'm a
I
little
don't think
afraid
you need to see it in person.
I'm a little afraid, but I will say it's on that level of bad. It is. It's hard to look at both of those in one sitting, even.
On a separate note, like why is that? Like why, you look
I
back
don't
to
know.
statues thousands of years ago,
I
with
know.
marble and
I
bronze
know.
and everything, and they're so perfect.
We
And
lost
like,
the
why-
recipes. I don't know what happened.
I believe it has something to do with TV. TV was
Right.
invented, and all our artistic capability is gone.
Probably. Oh man. But yeah,
we need to
I
raise a new generation of what are these statues made of? Are they usually like bronze? I don't even
Bronze.
know.
Yeah,
I think they're bronze,
okay.
yeah.
Typically
Yeah.
bronze.
We need to
Yeah.
invest in the next generation of bronze artisans, I think. On that
Oh
note,
man.
Yeah.
it was great for you to join us, Kyle. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the samples. Thank you for the mystery
Absolutely.
challenge. That was
Thank
a
you.
roller coaster ride. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I don't know. I've got to get myself to Madeira at some point now, I feel like. So Hawaii of Europe is a good selling point when
Oh
I
yeah,
talk to Samantha about
it's totally
this.
worth
So,
it.
yeah.
Totally worth it.
All right. Well, thanks to you. Shout out to all the DC Rum Rebels. You guys are doing great rum community work out there in the DMV area. So we appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone, that is going to do it for the Rumcast Guide to Madeira Rum. Hey, special shout out and thank you to Kyle from DC Rum Rebels for joining us there at the end. That
Yeah.
was super fun. John and I really enjoyed the reveal of the banana eau de vie, getting to taste the banana eau de vie. I didn't even know such things existed.
Mhm.
Just goes to show all the amazing, interesting things going on in the island of Madeira, islands of Madeira, I should say. But we would love to hear any of your thoughts. Those of you who have gotten the chance to try some of these Madeira rums, some of the ones that we haven't tried yet, send us an email, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. Or you can find us on social media. John, where can they find us?
At Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads, also YouTube. You know the drill by now. This is
Yeah.
not the first episode you've listened to, and you know where we're at. But if you haven't yet, leave us a comment. Leave us some feedback. Let us know. Give us an email. Whatever you want to do to communicate. We do love seeing the feedback. We do love seeing the community interact. Join us on Patreon. Also, Will, I know we have the Patreon. The Discord community is hot. It continues to be a fun thing that a lot of rum lovers just get together on and just talk rum. And I love that we are able to do that. I'm very grateful and thankful for that.
It's super cool. Yeah, we appreciate all of you for listening, everyone supporting the show. It's awesome. We can't wait to do more of these guide series, episodes.
Series. Yeah.
I'm a few rums deep right now, John. Anyway, that'll do it for this show. Hey, let us know also what guide you would like to see next. We've mentioned some of the ones we've done in the past. There's a million candidates we could do next. Let us know what you'd like to see. But John, until next.
Last thing.
Yeah,
we're releasing this at Thanksgiving, and I just want to say thank you to all you, like you said, out there who are listening to this podcast. Where years at this point of talking rum, and Will, thank you to you for allowing me to talk with rum. Wait, I'm a few rums in now too. To talk about rum with you is a pleasure. So
armpit tasting notes at all. I love every second of it. I'm thankful to talk rum with you as well, John. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
It's a blast. I can't wait to do the next episode, which we'll be back with very soon. All right.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.